And we also aim to provide data sets, information, tools, technology to urban end users, urban users such in World Bank, UN, Africa, South America, and planning and environmental management agencies in other developing countries. We support UN SDG 11 and also support Paris Agreement pillars, the adaptation, mitigation, and capacity development and technology transfer. We also aim to support the Sendai framework target by providing information about existing data gaps and integration methods between global urban observation with some other, challenges in the urban ecosystem, indications of population, other socio-economic data as well. Are you able to launch?
But hey, I think we could maybe, just because our program is running late.
Yeah.
We will ask more questions, and then maybe at that point we can then push out the slides and show them.
Okay.
So try to do that, technical guys, because just the Zoom on this, because we have still one more speaker that I didn't introduce in the beginning. I have the very big pleasure of having my colleague Kröger from Finnish Met Institute present. She's an early career scientist, and I think it's important that we always push the youth to the screen as well. So Anni, we have these questions of where does the future bring us and what can we do with Earth observation. So what is your take on this? And I hope we get you on screen here as well.
Well, thank you, Mikko. I was a bit worried that you forgot about me in the beginning. But so for your question, I think that one important trend in use of Earth observation in urban development is that it's not just about satellite images and real-time observations or monitoring of events, because we also have a lot of modeled prediction data or forecast data available, mainly weather forecast, but also climate model data and seasonal forecast, which can be combined with the observations so that we can create even better solutions for the cities, for the challenges that we have talked about here too. So just quickly, seasonal forecast, as Mikko already mentioned, if I heard correctly, is a 6 months outlook or forecast, and it is updated once every month. And why I think this is an important trend is because one key theme in urban development or urban resilience is preparedness, or the ability to prepare for events. And we heard about the challenges due to climate change that the cities, for example, in Harmonia project, but elsewhere, of course, too, are facing, which are, for example, heat waves and flash floods. It's not good if we only monitor these events when they are happening. It would be good if we can also see months ahead the probability for such events, for example, extreme precipitation causing flooding events, because then we would have better response planning, early warning systems, and decision making would be easily to do. But also these seasonal forecast data and also observations and EO in general should be done so that it is easily interpreted, user-friendly, and findable too, as we actually, I think, discussed before. So, for example, in Helsinki, we are already using weather forecast and seasonal forecast in operational planning in the city, for example, for snow plowing activities and other such events. And as Mikko already mentioned, in Harmonia, we are developing the flash flooding preparedness service too. So I think in EO perspective, seasonal forecast is good because then we can not only avoid disaster, but also maybe even benefit from knowing that such an event could be happening in the future. So we can, like, if there is extreme precipitation or rainfall coming in, how can we avoid runoff and conserve water and such. So we already have a lot of data for the Harmonia project, for example, on our FMI SmartNet server setup. I can put the link to the chat in a minute. and we are developing the system. But that's maybe all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. I think now program time is pushing us to the one more small presentation. Laureen, I think we have not yet put into the picture also that the citizens and people on the streets are also important, let's say, assets that we try to use. So
yeah,
now,
I will
wait, okay, I guess we now got the Yifang presentations up, but I would not only, can we just pick one or two slides and explain them? Okay, Laureen, so we have to go back to the Zoom and let Laureen, you would share the presentation or just speak. I don't know how you wanted to do this. So it's about citizens' involvement in this urban resilience process.
See my screen?
Yes, it was on.
Okay. So yeah, as Christina said, the objective of Harmonia is to make the climate change visible and understandable by a lot of different stakeholders, including citizens. So the social component of the Harmonia project is very important. And in this way, we have developed the Citizen as Observatory. So it's in the Citizen Science Initiative. Citizen-based data is community-based environmental monitoring and information system that invite anybody to share observation, mainly via mobile phone or the web, but also through real workshop. There is a lot of definition, but the main component of a Citizen as Observatory, CAO, is the participation of citizens in environmental monitoring and governance, the bidirectional flow of data and information, the enhancement of Earth observation system with in situ observation generated by a citizen and the use of digital technology to do so. Within Harmonia, the objective is, as any project, to reach a sustainable result accepted by the local community, and therefore it has to address as many diverse observations as possible to be able to gain a better understanding of how to counteract urban climate challenges and reach the objective of the project and adapt those under the influence of local requirements. The inclusion of citizen well-being parameter alongside the parameter of environmental risk and possible damage to the urban structure make it possible to bring the scientific discourse of international research as we did and as we do in Harmonia to a realistic and concrete dimension of interest for citizens. But it's also an added value for the Earth observation-based solution that is Harmonia. Stakeholder engagement help to provide strategic advice to the system requirement, but it's also necessary to succeed in supporting a green recovery through sustainable development and data acquisition management. That's why we have a strong social and inclusive component in the project. Within the Harmonia project, we are currently at the early stage of the Citizen as Observatory. We have co-created with the 4 pilot cities a manual to implement efficiently the CAO by the end of January 2023. So Urba Sofia, actually with Urba Sofia, we are, due to our experience, we have proposed a methodology to create 4 Citizen as Observatory. But to be sustainable and concrete, it was crucial to collaborate with the pilot city. That's why the strategy was designed in order to consider their local requirements, their local limits, capacities, and opportunities. We decided to implement a double strategy, digital and analogic, and also to offer flexibility to the pilot city. Because working with citizens and on a topic in evolution as climate change, it implies that we need to use an agile methods. So our citizen as observatory will constantly adapt, even if it's follow a general guideline. In short, Urbasofia provided a manual with a step-by-step process for the pilot city, starting from citizen observatory group identification to have a permanent basis, especially for the workshop. But of course, the citizen as observatory is open to everybody. The guideline also provide ensure the use of existing data and experiences, because it's important to use what we already know. Any citizen can provide observation digitally through Google Form, EU survey, or the Harmonia website and the local website of municipalities. But with our objective to be inclusive and open to every citizen and every comment, because climate change concerns everybody, the pilot city will propose a physical discussion also. The interest for physical discussion is to let space for discussion and to go beyond what we plan to and expect in terms of observation. Because we think about a lot of subject and a lot of data, but we forgot probably a lot of things, and citizens need space to express more observation. It's also in our inclusive approach, because we want to stay open to any observation. And it was important to tackle the digital barriers from some citizens. So in this idea, we would like to have the observation from children to the early generation. Of course, the communication is a strong...
Can you finish up? 5 minutes is gone again.
Okay. The communication is very important. It's the main challenges with citizen participation. And contrary to data from Earth observation, that data highly depend on the people's engagement. So creating interest and engagement is one of the main challenges for the citizen as observatory. But as climate change are more and more visible, it seems that the Harmonia Citizen as Observatory create interest for the inhabitant, especially when we are talking about the local scale and so every concrete challenge for them.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. So I think these slides we will also all put out, and we are looking forward to seeing a app or tools that can be somewhere else also used. I think that's an important part. But we still have this one session to look at what kind of like other perspectives have we seen. And so these were just examples that we have in some of these, but there's also something else happening in the world. And I would ask Anni that you have a good example to come ahead and say, how are, let's say, things being taken care of in some other parts, and then also continue into what are those kind of challenges or obstacles, things to still work on that you have experienced.
Okay, so to start, in Europe, we are developing the seasonal forecast applications for cities. But one interesting thing is that in Chile, we are in collaboration with this SME or startup group who won a certain hackathon last year. And their idea for the startup is that they are using the city's webcams to monitor the air quality. So they are measuring the line of sight of transparency of the city lights from the live video streams. So that is at least one interesting application of EO data. And then you asked about the challenges. I don't know if you already mentioned that, but in the city scale, all the events and changes are happening in neighborhood scale. And then on the other hand, our models and especially seasonal forecasts are in a very more coarser resolution, or we are talking about tens of kilometers. So how to bring these two together is a challenge. We are developing solutions to that. For example, within Harmonia project, we are looking into downscaling the models with a machine learning technique called extreme gradient boosting. I am not going to go into details of that, but yeah. Thanks.
Now, others with these kind of thing, Yifang, you should at least have also some examples. So if you give a microphone to Yifang. And now we can also look at the presentation. Exactly. That was the idea.
At the same time, so please launch the slides. Thank you. Next, you have heard quite a lot about the urban resilience, and this link very well with the UN Global Urban Warning Initiative that was launched in March by the Secretary General, and I think in the 4 pillars, definitely, you know, the GEO initiatives and Harmonia has a lot to contribute. Next, please. Yeah, so you all know about urbanization, environmental impact, and go through it. And also cities want, cities want digital twins. So not only horizontal, you also want the 3-dimensional. Next, please. So that I think that's one of the challenge maybe we didn't talk about. We look at city only at 2-dimensional, but cities are growing in the 3rd dimension as well. So next, please. So this is an animation of Shanghai that's changing over time. I mentioned this already, so we can skip these slides. We go to maybe some examples. What we do at GUI is the development of methods that are globally applicable, so you can map any urban areas around the world. If you click on the, okay, and also we develop approaches, go back to the slides, for urban change detection. So the city planners wanted to know what changed on a continuous basis so that they can incorporate this into their planning decisions. Next, please. And so these methods are also part of a Harmonia project we develop as well. And we also develop global urban data sets. This is done by DRR, the World Settlement Footprint, WSF, and WSF evolutions you can see on the right. And with that, next, we also look at urbanization, what are the environmental impact by looking at the impact on urban green infrastructure, ecosystem services, etc. So, and also look at where is the weak links due to urbanization, and how do we adapt and facilitate or enhance those links by urban encroachment. Next, please. Urban heat island, that's like a typical example, how to look at what's the changing trend and how do we develop nature-based solutions to adapt this. And again, urban flooding, that's another extreme events affect build-up areas. This is Beira in Mozambique due to the cyclone. And so we mapped those flooded areas in near real time, provide this to the UN HCR on the ground. We also developed tools for sustainable cities or resilient cities. So this is a tool for the land use efficiency indicator. This is collected in the EO for SDG toolkit, as mentioned earlier. But maybe if you go to the next slide, next one. So you can try the tool yourself. It will be shared, but we also contribute to the GEO Knowledge Hub and share doing capacity building, organize conferences, special sessions. Next, please. Just want to maybe forward one more, next. I want to skip all of these. We don't have time to deal with. Yeah. Here, I want to mention the toolkit. It was already mentioned earlier. Within the toolkit, we have free and open ready-to-use EU data. This is GEO for SDG and GEO2 urban initiatives, together with many contributors collaborating with UN Habitat. Now this toolkit is hosted at the UN Habitat site. So we provide ready-to-use EU data sets, we provide tools, and we also provide use cases. So maybe just show the next 2 slides, just example data, there are a lot of data, a lot of tools, and a lot of use cases. Thank you very much. So I'm in time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Yifang. And I think we are so close to concluding here that I want to just bring in that now that there are these lots of the solutions we have also not maybe mentioned enough, that of course lots of this is because we have free and open Earth observation, let's say, data. So at least in Harmonia, most of it comes from the Copernicus program, so the EU Earth observation program, where we, for example, the seasonal forecasts, all that data that we are using is actually available as the raw material. We have the Sentinel data sets, many of these slides already. So I think we have to really thank not just the European Union programs. The Americans have also for a long time given the data. We would urge everyone else to do the same, because that's a prerequisite. But I think we are now also very much, and thank you for the EVO toolkit as an example, that the software to do things, then maybe also that something is more processed forward, that these things are also moved ahead, and that we find lots and lots of more people who would just with their browser play with these, because let's face it, it's not for all of these actions that you actually need to have a supercomputer, but it's more like has time, uses a web browser and does things with things. That's already a step forward, and I would hope that that's a possibility to get these things more in real action, also not just and some developers have done stuff, but it would be also applied. So that's my concluding words. Anyone from the audience want to say something? How was this session? You survived it at least. Because I think we did push too much in too short time. We knew that from the start, but that's why I will see to it that these presentations, I'm sure that we can share them. So I will just collect them, actually try to get them on the observation website so that they are included into the session, because I think that is planned. Otherwise, if you leave me your contacts, I can also just put them up somewhere in the cloud and send you the links that you can check them out. And yeah, because I think we're going to lunch, so there's no real point to try to kind of overextend this session. If anyone wants to say still something, Eleni, you're also fine. Fine, Yifang is fine. Anyone on Zoom still needs to urgently get to say something, or are we just happy that this is over and it was nice? Thank you for the technical support people and all the presenters. It's a wrap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's the only thing we want to say. Thank you very much, everyone. And in case they stay in touch with Harmonia, we'll be happy to, as Miko said, share the materials and think of other collaboration opportunities.
Yes. Thank you, Veronica. And bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Fourier in Ghana, and we are still waiting for some speakers. So for the people that are remotely connected, please, we will start in 5 minutes. Thanks for your understanding.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, for the people that just arrived, we are still waiting for some speakers, so we'll start in a few minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all, and thank you for coming into the session. And for those online, thank you for tuning in. I'll be your moderator today, this afternoon. Thank you for the privilege. Thank you for being here. Unfortunately, I don't have all the bios for everybody that will be participating in this session, so I will ask speakers to introduce themselves as they actually start presenting. So without further ado, I'm happy to go over a presentation that I have prepared for this session. And so if you could please pop up that presentation. It's the one you had there already before. It was there a minute ago. Apologies for those online. We are trying to resolve a little technical issue with the location of the presentation. Shouldn't be too long. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. The deck has been located. We're in a process of transferring it to the system. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. Appreciate it, and apologies for the delay. My name is François Soulard, and you are indeed in the session titled Earth Observation for Ecosystem Accounting in Ghana. But given that I'm from Canada, I thought I would title my presentation Ecosystem Accounting, Earth Observation for Ecosystem Accounting in Canada. So without further ado, next slide, please. So what over the next few minutes, we'll be reviewing a little bit of basic information on EO4EA, what it is, be talking a bit to the SIA ecosystem accounts, which are central to our meeting today. A few words about ARIES, and I'll speak to it when I get there, and then a few examples from Canada in terms of maps and the conclusions I draw from all of the work that's been done in that front. So you could do two more clicks, please. So EO4EA is an official group on Earth observation initiative. It was created back in 2016, I believe. And if you want to have more information, look at page 124 of the GEO program that's on the website. So the purpose of the EO4EA group is to further the development of Earth observation for natural capital accounting. That is specifically consistent with the new standard on ecosystem accounts that I will be speaking to in this deck. And the mission is to document, pioneer, and develop and test methods and tools to allow Earth observation technology to be more effectively enable the widespread adoption of ecosystem accounts. So the group, I'm on the steering committee. It's a large group. It includes governments, academia, intergovernmental organizations, NGOs, and it's housed at Conservation International in Washington and funded through a NASA ROSE program. Next slide, please. So there are four objectives for this year, or priority activities, I should say. One being to explore the applications of ARIES. Again, I'll be speaking to that in a minute. But also to promote the use of ecosystem account ready data. So what is referred to here is data that would be from Earth observation, but that would be more readily acceptable for national statistics offices and other people that do ecosystem accounting without having to put too much effort in translating the information. The two other objectives, priorities are also member engagement and leveraging GEO, as I hope to do today. So next slide, please. Yes, you can bring it up. One more. Thank you. So I'll just say a few words about this because perhaps some of you are not aware, but the system of environmental economic accounting is not equivalent, but let's put this in perspective of the system of national accounts. Last century, this macroeconomic system was developed in order to be able to track issues with the economy and not live through another Great Depression. It became known as the system of national accounts, and we all know its feature indicator, which is GDP, right? But even at that point, when this was being developed, we knew there was a component missing, and that component is looking at the environment as a source of inputs to the economy. So this was identified specifically in the Rio Conference in 1991. And in 1993, the work started on creating this SIA system, and it took 19 years. And in 2012, the central framework, the one on the left there, was adopted as an official statistical system worldwide. And this looks at the environment as a provider of goods for the economy, timber, fish, energy, subsoil assets, and so forth, but also the emissions from the economy. So the residues, greenhouse gas emissions, for example. But even when this, as this was accepted as a standard, we knew it was not complete. What was missing was the ecosystem component. So at the same time the central framework was adopted, we were already working on experimental ecosystem accounts. And lo and behold, 9 years later, on April On March 21st, 2021, the ecosystem accounts was adopted as an international statistical standard by the highest authority in that domain, which is the UN Statistical Commission. So what ecosystems do is instead of starting with the economy and looking back at the environment as a provider of goods, it looks at the ecosystems, identifies the type of ecosystems, and also the kind of services that are provided by these ecosystems and from which we derive benefits. So it's ecosystem centric, and it allows us therefore to measure the value of the services that otherwise we would take for granted. All of these services, or most of these services, are not included in measures of GDP. They are what we call non-SNA benefits, non-national system of national accounts benefits. So it's not one account, it's a series of accounts. So you have at the bottom there on the next slide, please. You have at the bottom left the asset, and that's measuring the extent of our ecosystems. The next account is, sorry, you can come back, please. In this box, you have the condition account, services, benefits, and these accounts together allow us to do evaluation of these services and can be integrated in environmental economic accounts. Next slide, please. So that was on the statistical framework. Sorry, it's quite quick, but we could have spent a whole hour on that slide alone. But a few words about ARIES, I'm sorry. So ARIES is a system, a platform to help countries identify the spatial extent of their ecosystems. It was developed in the Basque Center for Climate Change, and a lot of different researchers participated in its development. And there's an aspect of the ARIES that was developed specifically for the SIA. So unfortunately, the images are not in the right order, but if you could see the map behind, it's a map of Ghana, and it was done by my friend and colleague from the USGS, Ken Backstad, for this meeting. He just generated an ecosystem extent map for Ghana, and the system ARIES allows for the generation of tabular data and also textual information based on these results. So it's based on semantics, it's machine actionable, and the idea is to have machines talking to each other. So we have, can you please close the door? So we have applied ARIES for SIA in Canada. And at the bottom left map is a product of SIA, of ARIES, I'm sorry. And at the top right is a map that we compile, which includes the best existing data for Canada to measure the extent of ecosystems. So you see they look quite close in terms of overall perspective. So we can say from this that ARIES is a fast and easy way to start. SIA accounting based on the FAIR principles, FAIR standing for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. So the Canada extent map in ARIES is visually similar to our map of ecosystems. But when you look into the details, it's fairly coarse and not good enough for us to do ecosystem accounts with at this point. We would need to integrate our own national data and more to make it functional. But as a first attempt to mapping ecosystems, ARIES is certainly a useful way to go. And ARIES also allows models for services, ecosystem services that is, and condition variables to be adapted by GIS users, and therefore has that added value to it. So we saw SIA, we saw EO4EA, we saw ARIES. Now we turn attention to Canada's application of ecosystem accounts. You could bring down the next, yes, thank you, or the one before, yeah. So I wanted to make it clear that StatCan is becoming a regular user of Earth observation, but is not by any means a big user of Earth observation. We have, I think, 8 programs that uses Earth observation. We were amongst the first working with our colleagues in the agriculture department to generate data that replaced an actual survey of agriculture using Earth observation. We do a crop condition assessment program based on Earth observation. We detect greenhouses, solar panels. We detect and classify building construction sites, and so forth. But in our case, the example I'll give later in this presentation is for ecosystem accounts, and it's based on the use of MODIS and DVI data to measure the greenness of our urban area. So it's a growing field in StatCan and hopefully in other national statistics offices as well. Now, what allows us to do this is that we have recently received significant funding to launch a Census of Environment program. And I won't get into this now, although I'd love to, but maybe we can touch base after if you're interested, or you can go to this link here where you would get information on the Census of Environment. So the census, some of the goals of the census using EO would be to support the delineation of ecosystem assets, provide measures of condition of the ecosystem assets, support modeling and estimation for ecosystem services, and also allow advanced statistical analysis to track spatial and temporal changes. And I'll be talking to that point later in the deck. And maybe the last point that I added, I think it's appropriate. It fosters interdepartmental and departmental collaboration because StatCan is not an expert in use Earth observation. We do have remote sensors that do terrific jobs, but other departments produce these data. So this enables us to work with these departments to further our program. So if you want to know where we're at in terms of ecosystem accounting in Canada, we released this study earlier this year in January, and it's in the publication titled Human Activity and the Environment. And it's basically an overview, aggregation of all of the best ecosystem related information in the country. And it touches on various aspects. So you could flip one more slide, please. So it touches on settlements, on agroecosystems, on forests, on wetlands, on oceans, on freshwater, and we look at various components of the accounts without it being an actual report on accounting because we don't have the data to do that yet. So current research. So we use Earth observation to do land cover, land use measures for ecosystem accounting. We also use temporal trends from SAR-EO time series via an advanced statistical analysis. It's called functional principal component analysis, and I'll show you results of that. And that's very promising, in fact, in terms of deriving ecosystem extent from SAR data. We work on our urban areas, and we also work on marine and coastal ecosystems. But before we get there, you saw this map in the slide prior to this one when I was talking about ARES. The map on the left is our best aggregation of existing data for all of the ecosystems that we have, and not all, so high-level ecosystems we have in Canada. Each of these data sets are the best that exists in its own thematic category. So we have the water, that's our best layer for water. It's the best layer for grassland. It's the best layer for forest, and so forth. But they don't meet the criteria of statistical classifications, and that they're not mutually exclusive. So experts in water area would have defined this best layer, but then you tend to have forest that's over these water areas. So what do they become? They become a different type of ecosystem, or do they simply become ecotones, which in ecological theory is the areas of transition between the different ecosystems. So it's particularly tricky to identify ecosystems using this approach. So what we need to do is what we have on the right, which is to include the best layers that define ecosystems and their characteristics, and overlay them and adjust them sufficiently so that we feel comfortable that they actually represent ecosystems. We saw work done by Esri in the industry track on Monday morning. It goes along the same route, but in this case, we're adopting the IUCN Global Ecosystem Typology, which is what is recommended in the International Statistical Standard. So that's something we are working on. And perhaps a tool that will really help us do a good job at this is mapping ecosystems. You could go to the next slide, please. One more. So I won't read all of this, but we're extracting temporal trends from seasonal SAR time series using this functional principal component analysis. And we applied that to wetlands. And that's work that was done in collaboration with our friends at Environment and Climate Change Canada. And next slide, I just want to show you a few examples. So this is a map that is derived from applying an advanced statistical component, principal component analysis to the SAR data. This is an optical map, and this is a map created by scientists in the field. So boots on, they went in, they mapped these ecosystems, these specific types of ecosystem, wetlands ecosystems, and we have very good mapping that is done automatically using a statistical analysis applied to SAR. So I think this is something we'll be investigating more, will need to be certainly vetted through scientific publications, but in terms of gray literature, as it were, this is very interesting. And you see here some of the results and how the different categories are quite distinct in most cases. And this is representative of the spatial definition of the data. Now, this is a test that we did in Bear Quinte, I believe, near the Great Lakes on wetlands, but this is exportable to other types of ecosystems. We also use Earth observation to measure greenness in our cities. So, and this has attracted by far the most attention by media, by academia, and by municipalities themselves. In that ecosystem accounting framework that I showed, you had the extent account and you had the condition account. This is a measure of the condition of our urban ecosystems. So we're able to track the greenness of our more or less 1,000 population centers from 2000 to 2021. We're releasing the 2022 data next week. And what this allows us to do is to look at a next slide, please. It allows us to look at any one of those 1,000 population center and track the average greenness and NDVI for that city. And we're also coming up with studies that demonstrate correlation through time of these strands. And actually, we're coming up with trend analyses that are statistically valid for several of these population center. And I'm not in, I cannot speak to these right now. They're not yet released, but I'm sure they will also gather a lot of interest. Now, more work that we need to do using Earth observation is to use better definition, higher resolution images. Instead of MODIS 250, probably go to Landsat 30 and measure the extent account for these blue. And if you want to come back, please. Through these blue-green areas, that's something we need to work on. We'll also be releasing data on temperature through time and associating it with the changes in the greenness. And then once we have those, we can actually model ecosystem services. We can talk about air purification. We can talk about heat mitigation. We can talk about runoff control. So this is, again, part of that ecosystem accounting framework, in this case, for urban areas. Second to final slide, I just wanted to mention this. Canada is close to 10 million square kilometers in area, but we're also looking at our marine areas. The extended economic zone is close to 5 million square kilometers. And given the interaction, the marine terrestrial interactions, we cannot not look at the condition and the extent and changing the extent of our marine and coastal wetlands. And in fact, we're releasing next week a framework paper on salt marshes in Canada and how do we integrate that in our ecosystem accounting framework. So I'll finish on this slide. A few conclusions. One more. Thank you. So satellite and in-situ Earth observation is a cornerstone of environmental accounting and especially ecosystem accounts. No ifs or buts, we need to have that to do the accounts. Number two is that rapid progress is being made by applying science principles, data science principle, with advanced statistical analysis and but also ecological theory and applying those to Earth observation. So it's that integration of different approaches that makes it really useful. But, and that's the third conclusion, is that a lot of challenges remain. And currently EO is a complementary data source, however, central and growing importance. We're still using a lot of data that were developed over time using other means. 4, national statistics offices need to work with other government departments, academia, and civil society to avoid duplication and maximize the value of the overlaps of the different work stream. So in my group, we receive funding from the government to do this kind of work, but we don't intend and we won't be replacing the work that the scientists at ECCC, Environment Canada are doing, or that people are doing at Natural Resources Canada. We have to work with them and add as much value as possible. Or to use agile terminology, we got to maximize our work not done. So all that we can not do in that field, we can do elsewhere. So that's one thing that we're keeping in mind. And lastly, and one reason I'm here and I was in Canberra and hopefully next year, is to conduct outreach in collaboration with policy departments and other data producers to maximize the benefits of ecosystem accounting, to support national policy, but also to fulfill international reporting obligations. You might have heard that Convention on Biological Diversity in Montreal next month. CBD has a global biodiversity measurement framework, and that includes some of the indicators that are based on the information I presented to you today. So if we manage to do this and gain momentum, it will be very useful for all countries to be able to meet their international reporting requirements and also fulfill policy, local, national policy needs. So on that note, thank you, and I'm very happy to communicate after this meeting with you if you have further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, François. Do we have questions on François' presentation? Yeah, we'll bring you the microphone. And can you also put maybe the chat to see if there is any question from our remote participants? For the remote participants, please add your question in the chat or raise your hand and we'll come to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Malik Majin Herrera. I'm an environmentalist. I like your presentation, but I want to find out if your approach, it looks like a bottom up. You're focusing on the environment, whilst the government is rather focusing on the economy, how to benefit from or rip off the environment to their interests. How do you bridge the gap so that, I mean, that level of appreciation in terms of the accountability you are offering becomes the sole aim of everybody moving towards helping the planet and people?
Could you perhaps please rephrase your question? I'm not sure I understood the meaning of it.
Yes, you are focusing on the environment, the benefits to society in terms of accountability. But from the political stance of view, they are only interested in how to just take their resources out and make the most of it and forget about the environment. Now, how do you bridge that gap? Because it's like you are on two opposing sides.
Well, they're not necessarily, I would say, opposite, but what doing this accounting helps with is the accountability of the economic actors and political actors. When we produce the central framework accounts, we track, for example, how many cubic meters of water are required to produce $1 of GDP, or how many tons of GHG are generated to create $1 of GDP. We know that for the sake of our sake and the sake of our children's, we need to reduce GHG emissions. So by looking at the trends and the evolution of that indicators, we're able to identify if we are doing a good job of reducing our carbon footprint. So I think it's one more level of data that allows people to understand where we stand and where the trajectory that we're on. And the same for ecosystem accounts. I showed you the greenness of our settlements. we get a lot of media attention and from the municipalities because they want to know why is my municipality becoming less green compared to my neighbors who's actually becoming more green, because we understand that it's actually a better condition of an ecosystem if it's more green for all sorts of reasons. So that supports media articles, supports discussion in academia, but also for municipal planners to understand what's actually happening to their land. Now, there are many reasons why that can happen. Some of them they have control over, some of them they don't. But it's more information that allows people to debate and to make better informed decision. And if, to your point, if the politicians don't respect that will, well, that's when you go to the polls and you vote, you know.
Thank you. Any other question? We have time for one more question. No, all good? Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, congrats for the presentation. This is Gesarela Lopez from Mexico, the National Institute of Statistics and Geography. And as you well know, we are doing also the exercises about the evaluation of the ecosystem. And my question is about it. If you are doing something about the integrity, the evaluation of integrity of ecosystems in or services.
So you said integrity of ecosystems and valuation. Okay. Yeah. So on the integrity side, that would be when we measure the condition accounts, because they speak to the state of the ecosystem. And I would argue that understanding the condition account is as important as understanding the change in the extent of the ecosystems. Because when you look at the extent of an ecosystem, what really decides on the capacity for that ecosystem to generate services is the capacity of that ecosystem, which is based on the condition of the ecosystem. So you can have an ecosystem that hasn't really changed in extent, but the condition has degraded and the service provided is not as it used to be, or oppositely, it's actually being restored. So the services are better. So condition accounting is very important to understand the services. Now the value, yes, we will not, in fact, the answer is not yet. We plan to go there. It's still, the methods to do ecosystem services valuation are still being developed. When I said that the ecosystem accounts became a standard, that was on the biophysical side. The monetary side is still being explored. It's particularly challenging. And I'm not sure if you want me to get into too technical details, but what we have in the system of national accounts, the values are based on what we call exchange values, meaning there's a market price to them. But all of these ecosystem services, or most of them, don't have a market price. So you got to find a way to mimic that price in order for the data, for the values to be compatible with the system of national accounts. There are ways around this, but they're being improved as we speak. So no doubt that in the future, we will have better ways to report on valuation side. And once we have a value on the service, we're able to track it back and put a value on the asset, which is why we're talking about natural capital accounting. We want to put a value to that natural capital account. So when we take decisions, we don't assign a value of 0 to the ecosystem, which is what happens in most places currently. That's changing in the municipal world in Canada. The authority that decides on the best methods to account for municipal, the accounting principles in municipalities is now revising its code so that the municipality can claim the value of the wetlands, the value of the forest, and the value of other natural assets in its books. Because right now, if you cut those down to put a forest, you just get an increased value in your books. Now that's being revised because of the reality of it is this is natural capital that municipalities benefit from. So there's a lot of change happening too slowly, if you ask me, but it's happening. But we ourselves are just beginning to work on the valuation side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, François. So we'll continue with the next presentation. It will be for Mr. Adabo. You are from the National Organization for Disaster Management of Ghana. So we will project the PowerPoint, please.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming.
So what's coming up pretty soon is something that was done on an experimental basis. I'm part of the Digital Earth Africa Product Development Tax Team, and we have this, what I would call a wonderful platform that allows you to pool data and then to do analysis without all the technical hassle. So a background to what is just coming up. Sometime, I think perhaps that was sometime last year or so, what came up was a lot of agitation in the West Gonja district, this admin level 2 district administrative area in Ghana, in the northern part or in the Savannah region. The traditional authorities had led a ban on charcoal making. It's a lot of agitation because they felt that they were losing a lot of tree cover, but there wasn't quantification of the loss. And so what I thought of with Eddie here, assistance was to pull some data from Digital Earth Africa. Please, next slide. Next slide, please. Yep. And then to do a quick calculation of how much is being lost in terms of tree cover. And this was done with a ISA climate land cover that is available. Moving forward, we've realized that the GEO-median can do something more detailed, so we'll be looking into that. But immediately what showed up was that outside the national park, they were losing about 15% of tree cover on a yearly basis. And within the national park, that is also in here, it was about 10%. And the national average was 3%. And so immediately one could see why the traditional authorities were so agitated. But until this was pulled up, there wasn't any real understanding of how much was being lost. And so we shared this through the National Statistical Office. And for us, it was very insightful. And so at least to a limited extent, this has been our experience with doing something along the lines of natural capital accounting, I see. And like I mentioned, we want to move forward using the GEO-median product to do something more detailed. And we are thinking that if this can be done at all district level, it will really drive home the point that we are making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Adabor. Do we have any question? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So my first question is in regards to the study area that's we were looking at, that's the accounting for the ecosystem. And first of all, when you look at Ghana, you realize that majority of the forest reserve is located at the eastern region of Ghana. So I think if we are accounting for the loss of ecosystem destruction, where people are doing illegal lumbering and stuff, the area could have been located at the eastern region to have a more be more abreast with the situation. Because when you look at West Gonja, it's more of Sahara land map. So there isn't more trees to look at, but if we are to look at the eastern part of the country, I think we would be more abreast as to the rates at which the ecosystem is being destroyed or being encroached.
Yep. So, as you've already mentioned, the study area is in the savannah. There isn't much land cover. But we picked this for study because at that moment in time, the traditional authorities had come up very strongly and were very agitated about what was going on. They believed that people had set up charcoal making factories. And so they were very alarmed at what was going on there. So we decided we'll pick that up. And also perhaps for strategic reasons, because we wanted to catch the eye of policymakers. The Minister for Lands and Natural Resources also hails from that place. So we felt it will be more impactful based on these two factors. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. I think in your slide, I can't recollect the statistics you've done with the parks and gardens that we have in the ecosystem. I think there are policies that governs them. And I think it's my first time of seeing this remote sensing imaging that have been showed some results on this. And I want to ask, is the public aware of this? Because basically for researchers, we are interested to pick the data, do our analysis and publish in scientific journals to know what is happening. But if your Digital Earth could put a piece in a newspaper domain, it brings awareness to reduce the impact of human activities on our ecosystem. Because we can see that our natural parks are supposed to be reserved. So as you rightly said, the Minister of Lands comes from Gonja State. And I think probably, I don't know whether he has seen this imaging results, because they make it clear that it is preserved, but we are publishing journals, but yet the community is not informed. So I want to know what the Digital Earth is doing to bridge this gap.
So it is to say, in fact, when we brought this up, the minister is also part of the board of Digital Earth Africa. So he's actually asked for us to do something more comprehensive with regards to this natural, natural capital accounting. I think it's generated some interest at that level. I know the National Statistical Office is also doing something with the various constituencies and making sure that this information gets to the MPs in Parliament, the members of Parliament. And so like I mentioned, this has been done. We want to do that for the rest of the country, look at it at constituency level or district level, and make sure that information gets to the policymakers so they can take action.
Microphone because we have people. Please, with the microphone, because we have people that are listening to us remotely. So.
No, okay. Because my idea is that when, as you said, he's part of the policymakers and he has this information has not gotten to the community. So what is the digital earth, apart from working on this to come out with these nice results, what are they doing, telling the community about sensitizing the community before even the policymakers finish making their policy? Because it might take them some time. No, that's my.
Okay, thank you very much. So for this particular work that we did, first of all, one thing that we wanted the policymakers, especially the members of parliament, to know is the capabilities of this Earth observation tool and what it's capable of doing. Then the next step in relation to Digital Earth Africa is to work with the government institutions at the district level, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to carry on to the community level. We are not government institutions, that's the work of them. So we are working with these institutions, and it's a gradual process. You can't just pick up this image and just go and show it to a person, even without having much information around it. So it's a working process, but the first initial stage is to make sure that the policymakers understand the capabilities of this. Then the next one, working with NAMU, working with EPA, working with Ghana Statistical Service. We are working with all of these people to make sure that they get that capacity so that when it grounds down to the district level, they'll also be able to send it to the community for them to have this knowledge at their end. So that's something that we are doing.
Yes.
Hi, sorry, I'm also from Digital Earth Africa. So I'm just going to try to answer the question as well. So I think it's an important question. And so I'm going to stand up. It's a difficult one for Digital Earth Africa to take action on, to be completely honest, because it's not really our role. Digital Earth Africa is a platform. And so if we now are stating things that something's going wrong, it's not really our place. We are not citizens of Ghana. Well, Edward is, but not everyone is a citizen of Ghana. But what we want to do, and actually at the point where something is found, we can actually share a blog post, we share information, we can do a press release. But actually the key element that we need to do is actually work with civic organizations, and that's in the country. They're the ones who need to take that forward with government to be able to advocate for changes to be made. It's not really for Digital Earth Africa itself to take action, because we're not a role player in that. And I think it will be, but this is also where I think it's been talked about quite a lot, how geospatial data is no longer just around the scientists, that this is actually a layperson can understand what's going on and a layperson needs to take action. And so that's really where we want to play a role, is to enable the lay people, enable journalists to also understand that this is information that they can take then to and publish it. Yes.
Thank you very much. We can take a last question before the panel. Yeah. And after we will have a panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sadabo, for a wonderful presentation. A quick one, you said that you are in talks with the members of parliament in trying to cover all the constituencies. Can you tell us some timelines when this is going to happen, so that that's what I heard. And again, so you correct me, yeah, because I'm interested and I want to know if that is going to happen, if you're going to extend it beyond Gonja, and which areas you're going to go so I can follow. So my next question is, if I want to know what you're doing, how do I trail you? How do I follow you to know what you're doing? And then, as he said, I am also interested in making this data open and public and the interpretation associated so that the layman can really see what is happening. And the last one is, in Gonja, what impact did this research have on the people? Did you really go back to the people? Because they were agitating. What really happened with it? I mean, no, just did it.
Okay, so with the so last year we had a data fair together with ASEPA to train the parliamentarians on this, and I think after that we developed 30 constituency profiles for 30 districts, and they were actually happy about it. So probably the next phase is to continue to develop more cases on them, which we are also on standby, and we are doing that together with Ghana Statistical Service because they are the leading for the data aspect. Yes, so I think right now this is actually taking a lot of interest. It's something that we can continue to work together. And just as Zico said, we work with the organizations to support them to be able to develop these products, as you can see here. So if there's any way that you also have to link to the community, DE Africa is actually open to be able to help you develop these products also.
And I think it was also interesting watching the presentation, the Canadian situation, and looking at the other thematic areas. We just looked at forest or tree cover loss. And the thought is that we will have more layers to look at and to understand how these are changing also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Richard from the University of Energy and Natural Resources, Sunyani. So when you were presenting, you said when you showed the data to the minister, he said you should do a comprehensive work on what you have done. It means this has some sort of limitations. Can you tell us one or two limitations of this work as at now?
So, not that there was any limitation with what we had done, but I think what happened was that he wanted something broader, wanted something that covers the rest of the country. So I won't say that it was, he wanted to see something beyond what we had done for this particular area. Can you maybe?
Thank you. So with respect to this work, can you tell us one or two limitations you encountered, please?
Yes. So, for instance, realize that even with the ISA land cover, there was a more detailed data set. But with it, there was no baseline data to compare that with. Okay. Yes. If that had been available, it would have been richer. So that was one limitation that was realized. Yeah.
Okay, and also I think the other limitation that we also noticed, but right now we have that product available was the resolution. The resolution was very big, 300 meters, but currently Digital Earth Africa has the GEO-median, which is actually 30 meters, and can actually use that one to also improve this product.
Yes, I think we can stop now the question. I was really animated. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite all the speakers, please, to go to this nice chairs that were prepared by our technical team, and we're gonna continue having a panel discussion with all speakers. The continuity of this question. You can also come with us, Edward. You will be our moderator as a technical manager of Digital Earth Africa. If you can take, I will give you the microphone, and now it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, let me, oh, should I in the okay. Okay, so thank you, speakers, very much for giving us such an insightful things on the ecosystem and how we actually can use the Earth observation to do that. But before you continue, I think one lady is among us who hasn't introduced herself. So I want her to introduce herself. Then after that, you continue the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Boma. I'm Dennis Sewa Ofosubadu. I work at Ghana Statistical Service, and I'm the head of Agriculture and Environment Statistics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So this panel discussion is actually going to be much more like open. You have questions that you will discuss together as panel. Then after that, if anyone also has questions for the panelists, they can also raise their hands and you give them the opportunity to talk about it. Okay, at this point, I'll start with Bernice. I think Francois and Victor, everybody right now knows them because they did a presentation. And because Bernice is also coming from the Ghana Statistical Service, I think I will be in a good question to ask her this question. In relation to the ecosystem that we have been talking about, Bernice, what is actually Ghana Statistical Service actually doing on it in relation to this?
Thank you, Boma. For Ghana Statistical Service, we just got support from the World Bank on their global program on sustainability. So as I sit here and I'm talking, we work we've got some technical capacity, and we started work on ecosystem extent and land accounting. We've also started work on ecosystem services. We are trying to evaluate the services part of it, then the condition accounting. We also have got support from, apart from ecosystem, we got support from other development partners to start compilation of more of the how do we call it, natural capital accounting. And in fact, this natural capital accounting issue was when the CRC, okay, let me say, when the system of environmental economic accounting was launched, that's the central framework in 2012. It was done in Africa in 2013. And we had a feasibility studies with EPA. In conjunction with EPA, we did a feasibility studies on how to compare this natural capital accounting in Ghana. So we have those applications online on EPA website, and in it, the stakeholders were able to identify a whole lot of accounts that we need to compile. And you know, when you compile these accounts, the ultimate aim is to produce a green GDP. And this green GDP is like compiling all the environmental losses, the depletion, the degradation, and taking it out of the usual gross domestic product that we have, so that we can know whether your GDP is sustainable or not. So, Mr. Boma, this is what we are doing now, and this is what is ongoing, and this is what Ghana Statistical Service is supporting with respect to environment statistics. A colleague online, if you can also contribute, Kwame is with EPA with the Strategic Assessment Directorate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Kwame is online. You can push Kwame here for us to see him, so that Kwame can also, if he has anything to add. But meanwhile, while Kwame is coming virtually, not physical, what you do is you go to Victor. Victor, coming from the National Disaster Management, do you see the institution having a role to play within this national capital thing, the discussion that we've actually been having?
Yeah, definitely so. Because when we talk about disaster risk reduction, for instance, passes all these, it also refers to the natural environment and how it's being impacted by either human activity or climate. Essence, yeah, because invariably it affects livelihoods also, and several other spheres too.
Okay, thank you very much on that. That means that also actually has a great role to play within this ecosystem through it. Okay, moving on to Francois. We wanted to find out about the census of environment. How does it is out here?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the answers you provided to the question. I think they're very important, especially what you said, Victor. Nature plays an important role in mitigating climate change and in supporting biodiversity. So there's a clear link between disaster risk reduction and ecosystem accounts in that ecosystems services, including risk mitigation associated with climate. But more on the note of the essence of environment, I'd be happy to talk for the next hour about this, but I'll try to keep it a bit less. When we finished our program on experimental ecosystem accounting 10 years ago, we had a forum, and on the table we're discussing what to do next. And we were very small. Happy to gridded approach. We're going to be accumulating information to provide information on every single ecosystem in the country. Delineating the ecosystems, providing information on the condition of these ecosystems, and allowing us therefore to model the services that are generated by these ecosystems. And this, it will likely be a data cube of accounting ready data, will allow us to create these accounts that we've been talking about this afternoon, but also profiles. If you go to the StatCan website and you look for any municipality, you get a whole load of information on society, demographics, the population age, income, employment, but nothing on the environment. Yet everybody that does planning in the country goes to these profiles, it gets information about society, but nothing on the environment. So they have to go and find information here and there to try to bring it together. We want to provide accompanying environmental information that allows municipal planners to have a better picture of what's going on before they take their decisions. And the last component is finding, producing a website, a portal that would allow people to do their mapping, to get service data as a services, because we'll be putting a lot of emphasis on the interoperability of the data. So users don't need to download the information, but could actually have machines talking to machines and so forth. Now, so we're just starting. We're about a year in, and oddly enough, this last August, the United States White House Office of Science and Technology Policy put forward a new strategy on natural capital accounts. And they gave the public a 2-month period to provide opinions and comments on their strategy. And they're going forward with this strategy. Their timeline to implement this natural capital accounting initiative is not 1 year, it's not 2 years, it's 15 years. So I think that speaks to the difficulty of doing this, but the necessity of doing it as well. So obviously we'll be sharing notes with the US and our colleagues in Mexico, because they are doing also a lot of very good work on natural capital accounts. But I'm happy also to continue the discussion offline with my colleagues in the room here today.
Thank you, Franz. So actually I had a follow-up question in what you were doing. How can Ghana also benefit from the work that you are doing? you have been talking about, I don't know, focusing on Africa, especially Ghana in particular. How do you get to also enjoy this work that you do?
Well, currently, and for the foreseeable future, we're only working on Canada. It is million square kilometers of territory, but I am involved on with the international community in developing the accounts, the principles. I'm on the accounting technical committee from the UN that's working on the implementation plan for these things. So that will hopefully have useful consequences for all countries. And also occasionally I work with the World Bank on development project to help implementing the accounts in various. So maybe one day if I be involved.
Thank you for that. Kwame is online and wants to speak. Hello, Kwame.
Hello, Ed.
Yes.
Good afternoon to everybody. Yes.
Okay, Kwame, please, you can speak.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon to panelists and participants. I've been following the discussion. I think it's very interesting so far. Maybe just to add a few things in addition to what Adabo and Bernice and yourself you've already shared in the case of Ghana. So we here in Ghana, and I speak for the EPA, and I believe I also speak for a number of government institutional partners that are within this space. In fact, we've been working at this concept of natural capital accounting for years now. And I'm not surprised that, for instance, what Francois just shared about the USA's strategy for natural capital accounts is 15 years. We started preliminary work around 2017, 2018. So Dr. Bernice just referred to a number of studies that we've done in country, and it's a process. This doesn't happen in a day. And I think this is something that we all need to understand. But what is important is that there is that commitment, there is that recognition of the role that natural capital accounting plays in this dispensation of sustainable development, really. And Environmental Protection Agency is poised and very excited to be working with our partners like Digital Earth Africa, the GSS, folks in academia, civil society, and all of that. Quite recently, we were on a webinar with the World Bank trying to project what we are trying to do. Now, the program we're doing with the World Bank on natural capital accounting, for instance, it's a 3-year program, which involves capacity for a number of institutions and also generating relevant, timely, reliable data that speaks to some of the specific scenarios on the ground. I hear participants talking about how are we engaging the media and the public and all of that. So the whole program has plans to generate or to facilitate what we call a national dialogue on natural capital accounting, for instance. This would involve bringing on board the media, the average Ghanaian, you know, and trying to sensitize high-level policy decision makers and all of that. So it's a program that it's taking shape, and it's broad, and we're trying to upscale where we started. And what the Dabo just shared is just a use case scenario for what is going to actually explain. But the plan is to have something for the whole country, and then, you know, have it speak to specific environment-related issues such as illegal mining, water scarcity and water quality issues that are topical in country and all of that. So we are happy and look forward to engaging further. And I think one thing I want to emphasize on is the opportunity that the Earth observation, like the Geo Week, is providing for us to showcase and to speak about what, you know, the intentions nationally are and what can be done at the district level and all of that. And so Earth observations are key. I think Francois in his presentation mentioned ARIES. We have we're lucky to work with the UNSD UN Statistical Division in Kigali a couple of months ago, trained about 3 officers in country on the use of ARIES and how that can be can feed into our ongoing work in natural capital accounting. I'm sure maybe the next GEO week we'll have more tangible products to share and how that is being used to better our lot in terms of sustainably managing the environment and bettering the lives of the Ghanaian public. Thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you, Kwame, for your input also. We really appreciate it. At this point, I think we've heard much from the panel, and we want to give it to you, the audience, also. If there is any question you would like to ask in relation to what we just discussed.
Thank you for the panel discussion and insightful information that being brought up. I think my question will go to the Ghana Statistical Service. She mentioned quite a lot of information that is ongoing, but my comment is, what work has been done previously and what has been the finding from the Ghana Statistical Service, and what has been the publicity of this to synthesize the mitigation of our ecosystem? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. For your information, this is the first time Ghana Statistical Service embarking on this compilation of natural capital accounting, including ecosystem. So for the past, what I know is something they did on forest, but it was not even conclusive. So we are now like starting in the compilation of environment statistics. But one thing, achievement that we have for now is that we're able to publish, which is on our website, Environment Statistics Compendium, using the framework for the development of environment statistics. And this, we got a technical support from the UNECA, that is the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. For now, this is the first achievement we have, and now we are building on it. So we went about seeking for support from the development partners to support us to produce more of the natural capital accounting. Like I said earlier, there was a feasibility studies on how to compile natural capital accounting in Ghana. And we found out that we can compile a whole lot. So the World Bank came on board and is supporting us in this. So like my colleague said, maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe this project will end 3 years time. So maybe in the next 4 years or 5, we'll have a whole lot of things to showcase for, because now we are using the land maps for 2015, 2019, and 2021 to do most of the analysis when it comes to ecosystem. But I don't know whether we will get more of the maps because we are in 2022. So maybe 2022 maps, if it is ready, because last I heard from the Forestry Commission, they are working on it. So if it's ready, then we are going to get more than 4 data points to do comparative analysis, where we started from and where we are now and where maybe we'll be going. Thank you, and over.
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much. My question is just a continuation of what Mr. Richard said with respect to what the minister told you. I'm surprised that you said he's on the board of the organization, because you brought a very good report, and it has to do with forest degradation. And most of the people that engage in those activities for economic reason bring them to the capital city because they don't consume all those charcoal there. So I thought he would say, okay, let's provide an alternative or a job for the people whilst we'll look at how we can provide an alternative to the energy that we need in Accra. And we didn't see that. He told you that we're going to do a comprehensive of the whole nation. I think using that, don't you think it's a mere rhetoric?
Yeah. Let me clarify this. I didn't hear that exactly from the minister's mouth, so let that be off record. But what happened is that we share the information with Ghana Statistical Service. I think the SDG Secretariat, yes. And from their end, they also communicate directly with the minister. Okay. What I hear is that it's had very good impact, and it's even affected. It's done certain things. Okay. But the feedback was that it generated enough interest to want to see what is happening in other places. So I would say that was his response to this report, that go and then do, but it generated enough interest to look into other districts and to find out what is going on in other districts. But at least from the feedback we got was that it had real impact, and it even affected certain decisions made at the West Gonja. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, last question.
I think someone let goes there before you come to you. Yes, please.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Timothy Alikamhavo, and I am from the National Disaster Management Organization. My question, I have two questions for the Ghana Statistical Service. The first one has to do with the issues that come up in many traditional areas where we have farmers identifying tree crops on their farms, protecting these crops until they reach very high maturity level, and then the traditional authorities take ownership and sell this ecosystem product. My question is, do you have, or are you considering a standardized evaluation method where the owner or the right owner benefit from the revenue or the cost of this particular product? My second question has to do with there is no boundary when we are talking about the environment. There's no clear boundaries, and activities created at one point are actually externalities that goes to degrade or destroy environmental resources in another area. Perhaps maybe could be in reserve areas. We are talking about Galamsey and its activities right now, and mostly we are talking about the fauna aspect of the environment, while the flora aspect of the environment, while the fauna aspect is also the pollution of our water bodies, also causing externalities downstream. What controls are you considering for protecting these services? Thank you.
Thank you. For your information, for Statistical Service, our mandate is to collect, compile, analyze, and disseminate socioeconomic data. So with this issue that you've raised, I think it should be more directed to EPA, Forestry Commission, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, because I'm sure they have the mandate to stop those kind of activities, or they come out with the boundaries and other things. Thank you.
Okay, so
it's a follow-up. It's a follow-up question to.
I know, but you know something? Our time is up. So what you will do is after the discussions, you can actually reach out to Victor or Benes, so that you'll be able to have a further discussion. At this point, we thank you, Benes, Victor, and Francois, for actually coming up for us to have this great discussion. And I know that there's a lot of questions in relation to this, especially when it comes to these natural resources that we have. And I thank everyone also for being with us for this through this 1 hour program, which we really appreciate it. So thank you all once again, and we hope you enjoy the program too. Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you for respecting the time. I think it was one of the most animated side events of the GEO Week. So congratulations, and we're invited to continue the discussion after. We're gonna have the next side event will be with colleagues from the GEO-LDN also. So I think it also will be continue to all these discussions. I think we are right on time. I just want to check. Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone. And expect you in half an hour, I think, for the next side event. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And so it sort of gets you in here. And of course, I'm sorry, Andrew, I've taken up more time than I should have. Once you're into the GEO loop, it's very difficult to get out no matter how hard you try. So anyway, it's been fantastic. So LDN, really, we've heard about this before. It spans right across scales from local to global. And there's many elements that are involved in LDN thinking. There's a lot of stakeholders at lots of different scales. It's a highly complex system and it's an evolving one, okay? We saw some of the new developments in some of the technology in the previous session, and new tools and processes are emerging all of the time. So what we've been thinking about really is how to sort of collate those resources in a way that is meaningful in terms of the LDN process and meaningful to people as they embark on trying to achieve LDN and access some of the tools and resources that we are providing for them. And the way we think we might do this is with a workflow. So have I got this wrong? So is it with a workflow? And so it's you'll see this diagram in a couple more times later on. We think that via our brand spanking new GEO-LDN website, we might have a diagram like this in which each of the sort of boxes and things are live links to the appropriate resources for that phase or part of the process, okay? So the sort of interface to that is something we've been thinking about. So the way this operates essentially is that there are some elements, these modules around the outside refer to the modules in the land degradation neutrality conceptual framework, which underpins the whole thinking around LDN. But the sort of monitoring and evaluation part, the calculation of degradation, so in some parts of the system. I'm holding this wrong. I'll try to hold it differently. And so, you know, there's different parts of the process, different resources are relevant at different parts in this workflow. So what resources do we have to draw on? Well, these are the three, well, there's three of the main sort of guidance documents that have been produced at least partly through the GEO-LDN initiative and the UN CCD. Scientific Conceptual Framework for Land Degradation Neutrality, the Good Practice Guidance document on 15.3.1, and the Global Land Outlook. So we talk about the conceptual framework, the thinking around how to achieve land degradation neutrality, how to measure it, and then practices you can put in place to try and achieve it with those three resources. We also have a number of software tools that we have evolved as well. TrendsEarth, some of you may have seen. It was written, developed at the same time as we were writing the Good Practice Guidance document for 15.3.1. It implements really nicely the methods that we wrote. And so this is really our sort of initial software recommendation when you're thinking about calculating land degradation. It matches very nicely with the guideline. And Gabriel is here, who's an expert in this tool, if you want to know more about that. Oh, good, I've disappeared again. What we identified as we looked at the tools and the resources that we had available, was that there was a gap in the tools to help countries plan to achieve the neutrality part, that balance of consumption and restoration and avoiding and things like that. And so we had a competition, it seems like just last week, but it was a few years ago, last year, I think. 2 years ago, man. And we had a competition. We had proposals from every continent, actually, or apart from Antarctica, right? And what the winner was a company called SIO, who have developed the Loop for LDN tool. It's a tool in terms of federation. It uses outputs from TrensEarth, draws them in, and then uses a number of other analytics methods to help users decide on a path towards achieving neutrality. We also have, of course, data sets that we point to, and these are the ones that are described in the good practice guidance document for 15.3.1. There is, of course, a strong, what's the word? Incentives, not incentive, a suggestion, a recommendation that countries should develop their national data sets. But we have these available anyway to point to. Seems to not be changing. Okay, good. And then, of course, we've got standards. So we've got the guidance, we've got the tools, we've got the data sets, and then we've got this sort of frameworks and standards that we were trying to incorporate. You know, openness is critical in the development of any of our tools here, because we want everyone to be able to access them globally. So that's a really important thing for us. It also standards around making things interoperable and open and fair, findable, etc. Where we're using those. This diagram on the right-hand side is actually implements a data quality standards process that we incorporate into the good practice guidance document, and really to help countries determine whether the data sets that they are developing or choosing for their national analysis meet the standards required to report appropriately on LDN and the indicator 15.3.1. So these are all resources on standards that are available, that will become available through sort of that workflow view as well. So really the important phases, this workflow, this inner circle here, the phases that we've got is really sort of the key thought processes, I guess, around achieving LDN, describing and assessing the problems. So part of that is measurement, visioning and goal setting, planning, imagining what it is you want to achieve, planning to achieve that in phase 3, implementing actions to achieve those changes, monitoring and evaluation in phase 5, and of course, then it starts again. So we have these 5 main phases. And one way to look at this is actually as a workflow this way. And so this identifies essentially some of the tools that we've got that we want to link to for each of those phases. So TrensEarth, the data sets on the left-hand side that come out of TrensEarth, or the raw data sets that we point to in the good practice guidance document, come from a lot of sources. TrensEarth to calculate the extent of degradation, land AS, and there's a number of other facilities now that are really helpful for looking at essentially in situ conditions. So aggregate, combine those kind of data sets there. Visioning through the Loop for LDN process and a number of other models. Planning, the WOCAT database, describes conservation processes that might be suitable under particular conditions and in particular areas. Then again, we have an implementation phase and evaluation again with TrensEarth. So I'm not sure if I have my funky diagram. No, I made a much nicer diagram of this linking the workflow to these phases, but that's okay. You get the sense of what we're talking about. So where actually are we in getting this sorted, right? That's the question everyone wants to know. And so actually, we're quite close. And there's a guy back in the Secretariat in Bonn, Jonas Hansen, who's been going through all of the resources he can track down and making a table of them, like on the left-hand side here. There's about 40 in the table now, and we're working out essentially what they're called, what they do, where you get them from, and some reference material. And then this graph on the right-hand side is essentially aligning those tools to those 5 phases in the workflow that we talked about, right? We're getting ready to implement these through the website right now. When is the website coming, you ask? Thank you so much for asking. It's coming. Oh, it was just there. It's coming really soon. So here is our fancy new website interface, not quite live yet, but very close. We're talking weeks to get this operational. The website is, of course, one of the really important ways for us to communicate right through to the LDN community. And we have a number of programs like the monthly sort of symposia that we want to have that will be hosted through the website. And you can see, it's a bit difficult to see, but these drop-down boxes in the right-hand side include LDN Toolbox Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. So while we don't have the graphic live yet, that thinking around the workflow and where these tools and resources fit into that is actively, currently being implemented through the website. So we're just about ready to go. And I think that is about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Well-deserved applause. So you saw now in the beginning the scientific backing of the whole thinking of LDN and the mandate that was given to GEO to put this into practice. And now Neil showed nicely how the GEO-LDN initiative is trying to really put this into practice in a collaborative approach, working together with tool developers, data providers in a joint approach and in a federated approach to build this LDN toolbox. And I would now like to invite Amos, who is already really tired because he's extremely busy during this week. He's co-leading the local organizing committee here, briefing his minister and all over the place, leading lots of things, and I think not sleeping at all in this week. So thank you very much. And he's also one of the co-chairs of the GEO-LDN initiative and responsible for the capacity development approach. And he's a professor at the University of Energy and Natural Resources in Sunyani, Ghana. Over to you.
Thank you. I have okay.
Just the outside buttons, not the center one.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sometimes it's important to give a bit of history because it helps us to understand, especially we are all, hey, is it coming automatically? Okay. So I want to use this opportunity to really appreciate the sacrifice, the volunteerism of one person that have led to this concept. Tubin, very grateful for all the sacrifices you put in the past to ensure that we have a clear understanding of what works when it comes to capacity building. We get a clear understanding of what works when it comes to capacity building. Now, for us to really be able to tackle the different reporting systems, the different needs in the ecosystem, it means that we cannot have a one fix for all. And that's what we want try to describe as I go along. Yep. I try to see. I don't want to talk about a lot of things in this room. I just want to focus on this slide because some of you may have heard the other, and some of you are already playing the LDN role. So I want to emphasize on what we want to do. Now, the traditional approach in the last decade, when it comes to Earth observations under the context of capacity building has been some training workshops, sometimes some e-learning for a week, for a month. But we have realized that this doesn't help. This alone is not sufficient to be able to bridge the gap that we need. So we did quite a lot of review, and the persons or people, the offices, agencies responsible, especially for reporting on the 15.3.1 SDG goal, which are usually the National Statistics Office, that they are supposed to report on this. One thing we did realize was that 1 week training or 1 month training was more like a refresher. And it does not address the full ecosystem. Let me put it that way. One key denominator that we all cannot fight on is food. We all need food in one way or the other. And for us to have food, it means our land must be productive. And for us to do that, it also requires that we have to look at all the people involved. The grassroots, the farmers who are somewhere, the non-governmental organizations who are somewhere, the civil society who are somewhere, the academicians, the research institutions that are doing different things. We have to think about them. We have to also think about the focal points or focal persons who are reporting directly to UNCCD. They need some specific kind of training. We have to look at the national scale, because there are certain elements of land issues that are national, that need some kind of national attention. Then we also have the regional blocks. Maybe we take ECOWAS, it's a regional block. We take Latin America, we take the different blocks in Asia. All these blocks have some specific need when it comes to land matters. So to be able to address all this, now, when you now bring in the challenge, the technical or technological challenge, which my other persons, our colleagues have mentioned, if you develop a toolbox today based on a certain operation system, after 1 month, it's changed to an advanced one. Or sometimes it's even a degraded one. Then your whole, whatever you have learned becomes a challenge. It means you have to come back again for another refresher and things like that. So in this particular program, the GEO-LDN, which is the first initiative to consider this angle, which I think is a plus for the creators of the LDN, is that we are looking at a broad spectrum of training. We have people who only need a refresher 1 week to be able to make some simple report and submit to their president or submit to their government. We have non-governmental organizations that have received funding from their donors, and they need to report back on how their remediation issues or whatnot have, in a way, restored land to a certain level. They also need some kind of capacity. Then we are looking at those who need to really look into these tools and come out with some creativity by which, for example, they can link up to other initiatives like Digital F Africa. Brian is here. Thank you so much. Because by so doing, we can be making an impact on trying to address the issue of land. So in order for us to do that, we started with a long-term one, where we said we needed people in mid-management level to be able to start to make a difference. And especially, we are in Ghana. You are all welcome to Ghana. Let me take the Ghana perspective. Now, if you take Ghana, we have Lands Commission is there. That is supposed to give permits on land on different aspects. We have Environmental Protection Agency that is monitoring projects which are on the land. We have Water Resources Commission that is supposed to protect the water bodies and also give permits for other uses of it. Then we have Minerals Commission. The mineral is inside the land, right? They are also doing some kind of things, work that they. So if you look, you have already several agencies all looking on the land with different perspective. And all these groups need to have an idea about how their work in one way or the other has an impact. For us to do that, it means the technical capacity was necessary. And I still remember the former director of GEO, I'm trying to remember his name again, Gilberto said that capacity, we can't stop talking about capacity. That is what we need. Because if, for example, Minerals Commission, we have the mid-range officers, I mean the higher level officers, all have some knowledge about how to track their activities on the impacts. We have Water Resources Commission, we have all this, we have people trained and they can use the tools. We are going to make a very good way. So on that note, a workshop was organized, hybrid format. A lot of us could not travel because of COVID. But there were others that were able to travel. We sat down, we digest the issues, and we came out with some kind of ideas of possible causes. Now, I want to emphasize one thing we did realize, because we had to look at all spectrum of people. Some people may come from social science, may come from law background, may come from all sorts of backgrounds, and may not be interested with the technology aspect. So we had to look at all that spectrum. Now, there were two things which were critical for us, and I'm happy Baron is here today, that we said, we must ensure that works. You see, Gabriel is here. He's developer of trends.f. Yeah, I'm happy to use it. But if I start to try to readapt this tool as an open source tool for my challenges and to be able to convince my government to put money on the table, there need to be some ticking of this tool. And to be able to do that, it means I need some basics in programming. So I quite remember Gilberto stressed that this program cannot run without some basics in programming. And when our national government also came for accreditation, it was also one of the things they emphasized that some level was necessary. Number two, the number two that we felt was critical was also the fact that, you see, if you take Europe and some other developed places, land, who owns land is clear. It's either its own and you can click and you can see that, okay, it's owned by this person, so and so. You come to Africa, it's complicated. And I think maybe something, I don't know about Latin, how it is, but I'm just using the African continent perspective. In Ghana, we have several sources of ownership. One, by the government. And when we even talk about the government, there are different levels. Those of you how many of you are Ghanaians here? So that if I'm wrong, you correct me. Thank you very much. When we gained independence, some lands were automatically given back to the government. Then in the 60s, our first government was overthrown. Then we had a military rule. And during the military rule too, there was a different set of ownership that came into pass. Now, before we became Ghana, in fact, the first Ghana was just a southern part of Ghana without the northern part. So when the two came together, there were different kingdoms that were already established with their own lands. Where am I going with that? Land tenure systems in Africa are very complicated. And I think somebody tried to join during the workshop from Asia. I don't know, I can't call the name of that country, but she sent us basically that it was quite also an issue. So the students that are going to be enrolled will try to understand all the different complex land management issues. Now, what we are also trying to do in this program, there will be a number of courses they have to do first semester, second semester for the first year. But what we are trying to emphasize is that because they will be coming from different countries, they will have case studies by which they can really learn about the challenges, about the problems, so that they can be able to what? See how to apply that. Now, the other thing that we are trying to focus on is the aspect of internship that we are also focusing on. Now, if you look at it, though the University of Energy is a natural resource is supposed to host it, there are several partners playing a role. And Joss has just gone out. One of the things we did realize was that it was important through this program for us to also build what we call regional help desks. That in the event of anything, the students or whoever is undertaking the program can easily go there. And those regional help desks will also serve as hubs by which students can do some kind of internship. So as you can see, we have a number of partners who some have already endorsed, like AgriMed have endorsed. We are in discussion with GMS, Severe Africa, Digital F Africa. We have an MOU already with them. And they will be talking about how we can be able to engage these students to be able to use the portal and come out with algorithms on land, on LDN, on specific things. Then we have quite a number of faculty who will be supporting this program. In fact, last in Kigali, there were quite a number of other universities that wants to join to ensure that we move forward. So Neil has just mentioned this issue because, as I said, capacity, because of the different needs of different users, it is important we consider that. And there are quite a number of experts here, and we welcome your experiences. Some of you are retiring soon. The retirement means that you are starting another journey to say the things to the rest of the world, what you could not say when you were in your organization. They are important for us to change the world. So in general, we are looking forward to your participation. And like I just mentioned in my in the AfriGeo section, I said, it's a complex puzzle which we have to solve. I can't do it alone. Maybe I have some few puzzles, but I need your puzzle to fix my own, so that in the end, we are all working towards a land that can give us the value we need to sustain the planet for our future generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. And I couldn't tell you were tired. I mean, you've been so full of energy here. Yes, and Well, I think this shows quite nicely. I mean, we have all those tools, we have all the data, but it's not worth anything if we do not have the capacities to to use them. If we do not have capacities in programming to adapt the tools to the specific needs, and if we do not have the capacities to interpret what is the result of what's coming out of those tools to base decisions on those colorful images. I would like to invite our panelists, and there are no shares anymore. Do we put shares there? We have and also the speakers to sit on the panel so that we have the last half hour for our panel discussion. And I would just introduce the panelists already. So we have Gabriel Daldegan, who is working Conservation International, one of the developers of Trends.Earth. He is a land system scientist at Conservation International and has been working with geospatial data applied to conservation since 2004, mostly focusing on tropical landscapes. So he has vast experience in GIS, remote sensing, geospatial, data sciences, applied environmental issues such as fire, land use, land cover change, conservation-related analysis. He just ran a marvelous training the day before yesterday on Trends.Earth with lots of participants. So welcoming Gabriel. Our second panelist is Olivia Jimena Juarez Carrillo. She is an advisor and governing board of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography of Mexico, INEGI. So she has worked in a vast field, so in virtual and augmented reality, as well as 3D geometry processing. And she was also a mobile developer who managed Android iOS app Mexico and Cifras. Yes. So currently she lectures many programs, and she has lots of experience to share from her Mexico example. And she's also part of the EO for SDG initiative and represent the initiative here. And I would like to invite our third panelist, Phoebe. There you are. And Phoebe Odur. She's from the RCMRD, the remote sensing specialist there. She's also the focal point for AfriGeo at RCMRD. She has a background in geospatial engineering and climate change adaptation. Works at RCMRD in Nairobi. And as the lead for land use land cover, she utilizes Earth observation data to support development challenges in 10 countries. And provides support as a focal point to AfriGeo to catalyze national, regional, global synergies with Earth observation-based partners and institutions in Africa. And she recently also joined as a technical advisor committee member of the Digital Earth Africa GEO initiative. So welcoming Phoebe. And I would also invite our speakers to take a seat in the panel. So the cross-cutting theme, what we have for this session, it's of course land degradation, but it's about this, what we call the federated approach in capacity development and in tool development. And I would like to start with Gabriel, who has co-developed Trends.Earth, a free and open tool to support monitoring land degradation. And not only land degradation, also drought vulnerability, urbanization, and the potential for carbon sequestration. And there was a recent project that just concluded called Tools for LDN, and there you have tested the integration of several tools. So it's also a federated approach that you took there. So from this experience, how was the quality of land degradation assessment enhanced through the integration of these? Was the added value of integrating those tools? And maybe I will just add a second question to this directly. What challenges have you encountered in ensuring the interoperability between those tools?
Well, thank you so much, Anjay, for the very nice introduction. And yeah. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. My name is Gabriel Dalton. I'm the lead system scientist with Conservation International. As Anjay mentioned, we developed TransEarth, which is a geospatial tool developed ingest open geospatial data sets. The LDN scientific framework developed by our colleagues at UNCCD, CSRRO, and many others contributions. Thanks, Baron. And we use the standardized conceptual apply geospatial data and map and monitor global scale. We just with the pinky, good. And we just concluded the Tools for LDN, which is Tools for LDN is a project that we concluded over 2 years, in which we were the goal of the project was to integrate TransEarth at the spatial side of it, or meaning how we observe land degradation from the space. Pretty much, we've been applying MODIS datasets, ESA, CCI, land cover datasets, and soil organic carbon datasets following the framework. But of course, those are representation of the world. So how can we assess and have trust that these observations from space are correctly mapping and showing the patterns and process happening on the surface of the Earth? So we partnered with USDA and the Land Potential Knowledge System web mobile application. So it's a mobile application designed for assessing land potential, actually soil potential. So it's a land PKS is available for all the available iOSs and OS or iOS and the other, Android. Thank you so much. So you can download it for free. The goal, the idea is that all these sources, all these data sets and tools are open, free. You can help us develop it. You can download the code and the softwares from our resources. You can contribute by, as Amos said, if you have some coding experience, which is required, you can contribute to our softwares as well. And then not only bringing land PKS to go to the field and assess land condition on the ground, and to link to fill the gap between the space and in what's happening on the ground. We are not only interested in monitoring, identifying the problem, how can we solve the problem? So then we partnered with WOCAT, the World Overview Conservation Approaches and Technology, based at Bern University in Switzerland. So we can share and contribute. Okay, if we identify a land degradation happening in Brazil, in certain type of soil and in certain type of vegetation and climate, maybe other folks in Brazil or in other countries are also facing the same problems. And instead of them or us starting from scratch, we can share knowledge, we can share approaches, and maybe just adapt or bring this new technology, this technology that has been applied elsewhere to our local problems, and we can then collaboratively build upon each other's experiences and build the community and share solutions, and not only the burden of the problems. And with this project, we've been also developing different data sets representing land productivity dynamics, which is one of the sub-indicators that we use in our approach. And with that, we are making available options so users can assess which one of these land degradation land productivity dynamic data sets are further representing, are better representing, or less problems representing what is going on the ground. So users who doesn't have the capacity to develop their own data for their own country, they have access to these few options, and they can still apply the same framework, so they can assess land degradation at their lands.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. I would like to move over to Jimena there. Yeah. Also talking on the issue of interoperability, you brought an example from Mexico. So you can share with us about the barriers and
hello, everyone. You mean the example for the E15 that I mentioned yesterday? Okay, thank you. Well, first, the main barrier of it was that we didn't have any data within INEGI that would help us generate the indicator for other years different than our land use and vegetation map. So then we encountered the opportunity to implement an open data cube within the institution, and that was a long trip. But we did have a business to obtain at least the approval of it, thanks to it being oriented to the SDGs. So we find that a good way to communicate the fact that it was oriented also to governmental agencies in it being open, an open software, and also it being oriented to the use of open data. So it all of elements that sound really nice. So afterwards, we had the opportunity to train in the platform of Open Data Cube, and that was one of our first exercises, generating spectral indexes together with the GEO-median. We found a very easy use of it, or easy way to communicate the value of it through promoting it as a support data set for the indicators. We did find that it will complement the years that we didn't have data for, or field data for the SDGs. Sorry, for the SDG 15, mostly 15 in this case. But we did have our data to match the results from the classification. So that was also good, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to validate the information from 20 or 15 years ago. So we did, I think that it just complemented the things that we had available and help us go further in our monitoring task.
Thank you very much. So you mentioned the issue of capacity. It would lead me right away to Phoebe. As the AfriGeo vision is a continent where decisions, policy and implementation programs involving the production, management and use of Earth observation are taken with the involvement of all stakeholders, right? So through the establishment of an institutional coordination framework. So based on your experience with AfriGeo, how can we make Earth observation technologies and associated data accessible and usable by all countries, irrespective of their capacity?
So I think one of the AfriGeo mandate, and which is also the GEO mandate, is to make sure that data is open and accessible. And within the institution, and also through the network we have with GEO, we've created mechanisms to make data shareable, make data accessible. And for our CMRD, that is one of the policies that we uphold. Within GEO itself, we have the GEO system that helps to be able to make data discoverable. And now we are getting into the system where we are creating a knowledge, a a Geo Knowledge Hub. So within the Geo Knowledge Hub, it provides an opportunity for you to really share literally everything that you have utilized to create the data. So from the data sources that you utilize to the methods that you apply to the tools, and also if you have other publications. So you have a whole suite of information that you can be able to provide to users to be able to access. Now, the other thing that GEO really tries to advocate for, and as regional GEOs, we try to make sure that all the member countries are actually adopting this principles, is that we try as much as possible to work together, to collaborate and to share. So that way, when we have information that is already existing or tools that are already existing, it doesn't make sense to spend more time, more resources to create other tools and more data where data is already available. We can enrich what is existing, but it makes sense that we use this to provide information and to basically advocate for decisions to be made out of them.
Thank you very much. And I would just have a follow-up question because we heard of the postgraduate program, which is developing capacities in the long term, but we also have capacity needs in the short term. So what would you see is what are the capacity needs in the short term and what are the capacity needs in the long term in national institutions? So that spatial information can be used and promoted and mainstreamed.
So recently, if those of you who joined the GEO-LDN, the LDN session that AfriGeo just held, part of the issues and challenges that we realized from that assessment is that institutions do not have the capacity to be able to use these tools, or they do not even know that these tools exist in the first place. So the short-term goals is to let people know what are the tools to be able to address, whether it is understanding what degradation is happening where, what are the tools they can use for planning, and what are the tools they can use to support conservation and restoration of areas that are already degraded. So that component related to awareness, I think, is very key as a short-term goal. The other component that is very important as a short-term goal for capacity building is to understand that institutions already have people who exist within their systems. So we don't expect to take these people out and take them 3 years to another place to study or something. So we need to capacitate them in the roles that they are already playing within their institution with the skills so that they're able to use these tools. They're able to use these tools for decision making because they are the ones who advise their policymakers. They need that capacity. They may not have the time frame that is very long to study this training. So those short courses that are really targeted to make sure that they get the end user results that is needed for their governments to make decision, I think is very important. And then in the long run, there's a need to be able to revamp curriculums for longer training. So we need to have people coming out of universities that are fully baked to be able to address LDN issues. Currently, there's a gap in that, and I think that is also part of the things that we understood was a challenge is the system, the technology has changed. There's more tools available. There's change in curriculum and technology that people need to be empowered. So those are some of the longer term goals that need to be addressed to make sure that we're starting this at an early stage, undergraduate people being capacitated to be able to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we see, well, here just sitting a few people as an example, but the community is much, much larger of tool developers, of data providers, and of those that build capacities. So this is now a question for Phoebe and Amos, both. How do you ensure that we do not duplicate efforts? How manage, to really collaborate and not duplicate efforts in capacity development?
I will try to answer that from the perspective of what we just did. We had like a 1.5 hour session for sharing. That helps us to know what is happening in another region, what it is they have. So those sharing mechanisms, the communities of practice that we have built helps us to know what is happening in other regions, and also it helps us know the gaps that are existing and also the opportunities that are existing, so that we all leveraging on each other's strengths, and where there are things that are already there, we can be able to adapt them to our own local situation and see if those gaps are not being addressed, who else can we partner with to be able to address those gaps that are still there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Amos, maybe the same question to you, how to avoid the duplication.
That is a very important question. We have a saying that catch them young and they will remember it forever. You see, land issues are very complicated and diverse. So even though we have mentioned postgraduate program, there is also an undergraduate program that is running. Now, for us not to have duplication, I think that is why we have started early by bringing in all the relevant partners. And at least for now, we are focusing on Africa, but once it works, we are going to go into other regions. Now, let me explain why there will not be duplication when it comes to Africa. Our research has shown that there are a lot of different courses, but not a specific one. In fact, you can find one, but you will not find a course at the end. I think that one, we are very sure about it. Now, within Africa, just as we just finished a session, you will see that from Northern Africa, they are doing something. From East, doing something. Then you have this African Union big initiative, GMEX and Africa. Severe. I think the biggest when it comes to doing something, some capacity, when it comes to the issue of land management. Now, we want the students to, how to call it, to start to reinvent the wheel. So that is why our portal, the GEO-LDN portal, is going to list all these resources in one place. And in addition, we do not want to develop the MOOCs as a separate entity for GEO-LDN, because our discussion with GMS and Africa have shown that the African has a platform, a digital platform, and all we need to do is to plug in. And because it is hosted by the African Union Commission, it also means that there is long-term sustainability for such a platform. So it means once we develop the program and we develop the MOOCs, everybody have access to the MOOCs across the continent and across the world. Now, for us also not to have duplication, already we have universities from West, East, South, North that are already collaborating. Now, because it's also a modular system, somebody may like to do environmental law. And there's a module that the person can take, even though the person is not trying to follow a whole land management program. So the program is designed in such a way that it helps us to address all the spectrum of issues. Now, one thing, which is what I call a monthly validation of what we do, is those monthly forums that we are going to have. So it means maybe new tools that are coming, then because all students will be requested to join all these monthly forums so that they constantly challenge the emerging technologies and try to use all those existing tools to see how they can come out with tailor-made issues for their case studies. So I think how we want to go, hoping that in the end, we can have a sustainable capacity development strategy and implementation for this program.
Thank you very much. And you touched also already on the federated approach in data and tools. I was just told that we have 7 minutes left, so I would have some more questions, but I have to hold them back, unfortunately. No, I will get to you, but so I would just move right over to Neil now. Talking about this federated approach, you have this experience of writing the good practice guidance, the first good practice guidance, and now the update of the good practice guidance. And of course, this is a status in time when you write it, but development of data and tools is a continuous process. So based on this experience, what are the lessons that you learned, and how do you ensure that data providers and tool developers embrace this federated approach?
Yeah, thanks. Well, there were a lot of lessons from writing the good practice guidance document, right? And when you do something like this, when you're describing, you're trying to point a path to a consistent method to estimate something that itself has so many interpretations on land degradation. You ask 2 people what land degradation is, you get a different answer. You ask 10, you get 10 different answers, right? What it does as a sort of an Earth observation person is you realize when you're writing a document that's trying to not promote, but recommend one method over another for something as simple as monitoring land productivity, you're kind of putting your head on the chopping block, right? Because some people are going to not like what you're recommending and other people are going to absolutely love it. So there was a lot of the lesson is that people do tend to understand their own tools and the methods that they've used previously better than other methods. Some methods and some tools just apply better in some locations than others. And so as we try to point a path to this consistent measurement, you've also got to make those methods, open in the sense that people can use their own methods and their tools and still report things in the same terms that we need them to do so for the other, to really consistently provide an indication of land degradation across the globe. What was the second part of the question?
Well, how do you ensure that the tool developers and data providers embrace this federation?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the simple answer is that there are a lot of open standards now, or standards to make software and data sets open, which means sort of essentially put them on a path towards shareability, interoperability, adaptability. A lot of those standards are sort of evolving now. Some of those standards are more practical than others. Some of them are more sort of theoretical or semantic, which are important, but essentially sticking to those kind of principles, those interoperability, open source principles that are developing, and making those an important and an integral part of the systems that we use. I will just say that one of the interesting things at this conference has been the really trying to understand the role for GEO in a lot of the activities that are going on within GEO, right? That hasn't been so clear to some people. As the sort of global convening body for this kind of thinking, GEO has a really interesting opportunity to really be a place to not set the standards, I don't quite know what the word is, but to identify where particular standards are appropriate for particular data sets or tools or processes, and make those, promote the consistent use of those ones. So that is thinking that is evolving in GEO, just as it is in the literature and in the standards documentation themselves, and just identifying which are the most appropriate ones of those and making them an integral part of anything that we host or recommend through the GEO-LDN website is probably the straightforward way to do that.
Thank you. And we have 3 minutes left, and I would leave. So this makes you also having to speak the final words, Baron. So you have a very unique vantage point with respect to land degradation neutrality, because you were consulted when the concept or the definition of LDN was first debated among governments, and you co-led the writing of the scientific conceptual framework that was mentioned several times in the presentations. And you had others in GEO and in the GEO-LDN initiative to put this into practice, basically. So since that time, a lot has happened, and now GEO is being prospected as a candidate flagship as part of the GEO work program, of the updated GEO work program. So what would you say, what were the success factors that made this achievement possible, and what would this upgrade to a flagship mean to the initiative?
So it's kind of interesting when we, all the things that you just mentioned, we could add to that LDN had a massive effort to encourage countries to set targets, and the energy in countries to move forward with this idea of no net loss was very high. But at the same time, they recognized that if they didn't put certain things in place in the decisions, it could just break down. And the convention experienced it just with the definition of desertification. I mean, we lost 20 years on debating nothing, essentially. So they didn't do that this time. And the assumption was, among the people focused on the science and the people focused on the target setting, et cetera, was that we had to do this in order, that we needed to set up the framework and then do . But actually, the pressure was so high, we had to do it all in parallel. And we crosswalked it. And it meant that on a very regular basis, the scientists were receiving feedback in countries that were attempting to figure out how to set targets with methods that were not yet scientifically verified. Let's put it that way. That's pretty strong. I mean, they had some scientific verification, but the framework wasn't in place yet. And what it meant is that the framework became very practical, very realistic about what really happens. But the same thing went the other way. The countries were fascinated by aspects that were coming from the scientists that they'd never embraced before. So very early on, we got feedback that where it was always before a minister of environment or a ministry, we weren't getting that high level at this stage, but that those ministries were present, we were getting feedback that these people were showing up and then calling in their own Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning, et cetera, because they realized they couldn't answer the questions that were coming from the scientists. They needed these other players. So it's extraordinary it never happened in our convention. It had never happened before to have 4 ministries want to be in the room to set something like a targets, right? So I think one of the lessons in the scientific community, we always think it's in order and that things have to be in place and verified and validated and et cetera. But maybe that's not always true. And maybe a more agile approach to how science and practice come together, it was a lesson for us. I think it was a big one. And then in terms of what it means to be a flagship, you all may not realize this, but when we wrote the scientific conceptual framework, we put in a small subsection on GEO. Nobody in the UNCCD had any idea what it was. All of the reviewers said, delete this. But of course, my scientific advisor was Chuck Hutchinson, and there was no way in hell I was going to delete GEO from this, because I knew if we didn't have an independent, consensus building, cross-organizational platform, it would fail miserably. We would be right back in the game of choose the best data set instead of getting everybody to work together so that all data sets, I mean, did you hear Gabrielle? Like 3 different productivity data sets that produce completely different maps, but are entirely aligned methodologically because of the GPG, meaning a country can say this one is actually appropriate because they can't, that's a hard data set to produce on your own. I mean, soil organic carbon, land cover, maybe, but productivity is a big challenge, but now they can do it. So these are the kinds of things that GEO brought conceptually, and we kept it in the mix. And I think it's still the case, but I just have to say that when I hear discussions in GEO, I don't hear the power of the governments and the power of all the organizations. I don't hear that. I don't know whether you're grabbing the actual strength of the entity. I don't mean the Secretariat. I mean everybody that's here, right? I think that it's like a lesson I learned at UNCCD when I first started. I'm in some meeting talking about we're doing this and doing that, and somebody said, you have nothing except convening power, and you're not even using it. You're talking about things that FAO could do or UNDP. You're not actually talking from strength. I put that back to all of you in GEO. I'm part of GEO, but just a small connection. But a lot of you are very embraced in this, and I think you should be. I value it very, very much. But keep that in mind. You've got this, and nobody else does, even though they claim to do some similar things. It's not the case. No one has what GEO has in that regard. Thanks.
I think there was a very inspirational ending also for those who might have discussions in deciding positions here in GEO to take this, and for all of us as well. So we are already over the time. I think we were given 5 more minutes, and we consumed them already. I would really thank all of our speakers and panelists very much for your effort, for your time, and the participants as well. Thanks. And if there's any one of you at the registration didn't get their souvenirs, their bags, you can get them here.
Oh, thank you.